This is the new 2024 Lincoln Nautilus, and it doesn't look particularly interesting. It looks like another anonymous mid-size luxury crossover. And since it isn't made by Lexus or Mercedes-Benz, most people probably won't consider it. But the new Lincoln Nautilus is actually more interesting than you'd expect. And today I'm going to review it and show you all of its quirks and features. Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. Cars and Bids has around 600,000 registered users, all excited to bid on and buy special cars like this and this and this and this. So, if you're looking to sell your enthusiast car, do it on Cars and Bids and reach a huge audience. All right, time for the quirks and features of the new Lincoln Nautilus, which are surprisingly plentiful, actually. We start with the light dance that the Nautilus does when you walk up to it and unlock. You can see it is quite an involved light dance. The taillights do all sorts of things to show the car is excited to see you, like a happy pet when you walk in the door after a long day. It's the same deal up front, where the front lighting and the front light bar also do a little dance when you unlock the door to show some recognition and excitement that you've arrived at the car. And of course, when you lock the doors, same deal. Lock them in back, you can see the light dance happens again, but basically completely opposite of how it happened the first time. Everything sort of slowly turns itself off, ending with the word Lincoln. And also up front, same thing. Everything turns itself off kind of gradually and beautifully, ending with the Lincoln badge in the very center. This welcomes you to the beginning of this vehicle, which is surprisingly high-tech and quirky and interesting, and the lights are only the start. Now, unfortunately, you wouldn't really know any of that by looking at the Nautilus, because frankly, the exterior design is fairly anonymous and fairly dull, and it doesn't do a great job of communicating that this is actually a pretty technologically adept, kind of unusual car. But there are a few interesting touches on the outside that give clues. One is the door handle situation. There aren't any door handles on the doors themselves. Instead, they're integrated into the lower part of the window trim, which kind of cleans up the exterior styling of the car. You can see these door hoops that sort of swing out. You put your hand in and open the door. It's an interesting, kind of neat, kind of unusual idea, but it's what they do. Now, the drawback of making the door handle this way is there's no easy button to press to lock the door when you're walking away from the car. But Lincoln has thought of that. The lock is here. You can see a red icon on the side of the door that looks like an unlocked lock. You press it with the key in your pocket and it locks. It lights up as a lock, and then you can walk away. And eventually that turns off and you would have no idea that that lock icon is even there, because it blends into the black of the door trim, which is a really cool feature. You walk up to the car and unlock it, and you can see that this lock icon comes on again, but now unlocked, so that you know the car is unlocked. It's a pretty cool touch. And another cool touch in this area, you still have a numbered keypad on the side, on the B pillar here, where you can type in a code to unlock the door. In case you're out swimming, you don't want to take your key with you, you have a keypad you can use to enter the car. Pretty cool. Other exterior quirks worth pointing out, one is the wheels. I do not like this wheel design, but you have 10-spoke wheels with little lines on the spokes, and it's certainly distinctive and kind of interesting compared to normal boring wheels. You also have a set of stylish lines back here on the D pillar. Again, not really functional, but they're there to try to add a little more flair to this vehicle's otherwise kind of anonymous design. But the really big story with the new Lincoln Nautilus is undoubtedly the interior, which is a lot more exciting and impressive than the exterior might suggest. You climb in, and the very first thing you notice is the massive screen going across the entire dashboard. Driver's side corner to passenger side corner, you have a huge screen, and it displays everything. On the driver's side, you have your typical vehicle information like your odometer, your speed, your fuel economy, all that usual stuff you'd see in a gauge cluster. Then you have a map display on this screen, so well, you know where you're going. You also have a clock display on the screen, which is nice. Then you have the weather, and then you have the music you're listening to. Everything you could want to see is all laid out on this screen that's more or less directly in your line of sight. And of course, it can be configured exactly how you want it, which I'll show you in a minute. But this is a fantastic innovation that no other cars have really developed in quite this way. Mercedes-Benz has the Hyperscreen, which goes from side to side in the interior, but it's meant to be a touch screen, and it's mounted closer to you, and the passenger display is kind of duplicating what you see in the center. It's like they have too much screen, they don't know what to do with it all. Here, it's one giant display screen that shows various different things all in one. And the best part about this giant display screen, in most cars, they would just stop the screens there and then give you some stupid little controller down here to try to figure out how to adjust this screen, which frankly, nobody really wants. Lincoln figured that out, and so in addition to the massive display screen, they've also given you a touch screen in the center, like you're used to, which of course controls all of the typical stuff that you would want to control. Your media, your music, entering a navigation destination, vehicle settings, it's all in here. So you still have a touch screen you can use to adjust things, and then you have a display screen that shows you what everything is. It's great integration of screen technology, and to me, this screen stuff blows basically all of its competitors out of the water. It really is excellent. Now, with that said, there are a few interesting quirks with the giant display screen that need to be mentioned. Lincoln is trying to be this sort of luxurious, fluffy cloud, calm driving experience brand, and so there are some unusual measures they've taken to drive home that point, like the clock, which you can see makes a digital display, but also kind of an esoteric analog display as well, directly behind the digital. The speedometer is even more unusual. It shows your digital speed, but then there's a little vertical bar that shows the speed relative to nothing, just sort of going up and down, side to side in a field of clouds. It's very weird, but that's what they've done, and hey, whatever, I'll take it, it works. Also worth pointing out, with this giant display screen, one interesting integration is with the steering wheel. You can see on the wheel, the buttons are unlabeled. On each side of the center of the wheel, you have a pad of buttons here, but they aren't labeled. They don't show you what they do, and that's because they don't show their function until you kind of run your hand over it, and then the function is displayed on the giant display screen ahead of you. What this allows is for these buttons to have multiple functions depending on what it is you're trying to control. Depending on what screen you're on, navigation, music, whatever, these buttons can do different things, and they don't have to commit to just one purpose by labeling the buttons. And so you have buttons on your wheel, but you can't really see what they do until you kind of start running your hand over them. It's a little weird at first, but you do get used to it. Now, something else that's weird about the steering wheel situation in this car is the way that it's shaped. It's kind of hard to see when you're just looking at it, like on camera here. It looks fairly normal, a little small, but it's actually surprisingly squished down on the top and bottom. It almost feels like a rectangle instead of a circle or even a square, and it's a little bit of an odd thing to drive around. Now, they had to do this. They had to lower the top of the steering wheel to give drivers a view over the steering wheel and onto the giant display screen. It was the only way to make it work, but it certainly is an unusual implementation that feels a little odd, but again, you get used to it as you're driving. And there's more interesting decisions in this interior that certainly are eye-opening and unusual. One of them is obviously the buttons to select gears. You can see them here in the center: park, reverse, neutral, drive. For some reason, park is double the size of the other ones. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but they're here. They're nice to press, they feel good, but obviously a little unorthodox compared to most gear selectors. Now, also here in the center, you have your volume control for the stereo, and it's this like crystal circle that feels nicely weighted, nice to turn. It's very attractive, actually, and it pulls off the neat magic trick of not turning vol in the middle, the volume icon. It doesn't move when you move the outer circle. It really does feel like like magic. And speaking of that dial, there are also a few other controls in this center console, as you can see, a few other buttons in here for various functions. Your hazard lights, for example, your parallel parking button control. You also have a camera system control in here, your drive mode selector, and your window defroster. Now, it's important to mention that that is separated from the climate controls with this specific button because the climate controls and the new Lincoln Nautilus, unfortunately, have been integrated into the center touchscreen. You don't have physical buttons for the climate controls anymore, which is a shame. It's always a drawback to do that. Makes it just a little harder to use the climate, although worth pointing out that the controls are all along the strip at the bottom of the screen and their position doesn't change, which makes it relatively easy to figure out and adjust things. It's not like you ever have to go into any menus in order to do any real climate adjusting. But since we're talking touchscreen, let's talk touchscreen. This one works reasonably well. It is responsive, it's easy to use. The screen itself is fairly small, but of course that's no big deal because you have the giant display screen above that shows where everything is. This touchscreen is a little bit less intuitive than I've seen in some rivals, specifically Toyota and even General Motors, but generally speaking, you figure it out and it all works reasonably well. And as you can imagine, it has some interesting quirks. For one thing, it has built-in Google Maps instead of some proprietary map software, which is great. And that also means built-in Google Assistant, which is nice to use. Ford decided, I guess, they didn't want to try to do that stuff anymore. Best leave it to the expert. Now, in this center touchscreen, you can also configure what you see on the display screen at the top of the dashboard ahead of you. You can choose what it is you want to see, or you can choose a calm screen and then everything turns off except for the driver stuff you have to see, like your speed, your odometer. Everything turns off and it's, well, nice and calm in here. But you don't want that. You turn it off immediately because you love the giant screen and you want to see the weather. Now, also worth pointing out in this center display screen, this is where you turn on the massaging seat function, which is actually surprisingly hard to get to. You got to go into a couple of menus, then go into seats, and then you can turn on the massage. In a lot of cars, it's a lot easier than that, and I've been sitting here in this thing for a while without even realizing it had massaging seats. What a crime. Thankfully, I've discovered that now, and I can drive around and getting a massage. And I can drive around smelling things as well, because another nice function of this infotainment screen and the new Nautilus, you can turn on an interior scent that makes the cabin smell especially nice. It's located here in the center console. Mercedes-Benz also offers this, but it's in the glove box and it blows through the climate vents. Here it's separate in the center console and you can turn it on or off separate from the climate control, and it blows from right here in the middle, which frankly is a better placement and a better integration. Now, in this particular car, the scents offered are violet cashmere, sunlight retreat, which truly makes no sense, and then cloud balsam, which also makes no sense. But there are, well, scents, and they smell nice if you turn them on, and you can do that in the infotainment screen. But let's move on from the center screen. Let's go back to that center console that hides your interior smells and look at it for a second. It's nice leather with nice stitching and piping. It looks very good, and that is true of basically everything in this interior. The materials are excellent. Move on to the center console itself. You can see this beautiful like gloss bronze trim that just looks nice. All the buttons and switches have aluminum at the edge and it's ridged so that you can touch it and feel especially good. Everything in here looks nice. The seats have this beautiful perforated leather. Again, nice stitching, nice piping, and a lot of bolstering and support, as you can see. And frankly, just everywhere you look in this interior, the materials are very nice, high quality, top shelf stuff. Reminds me a lot of Genesis, which is Hyundai's new luxury brand that has also made a big focus on high quality materials instead of outright sportiness like BMW, Mercedes-Benz. This is about luxury and comfort, and you can really tell with the way they've dressed up this interior. And it goes beyond just the materials. Take a look, for example, at these little lights on the door panel. They look kind of cool. They're just mood lights. They have no real function except to make it look neat in here, and they do that. Instead of having the door panel just have leather, this one is lit up to add to your mood. And speaking of that, how about the warning chimes, which sound classier and more luxurious than you might expect? Take a listen to one of them. That's just one example of the warning chimes in this car. They come on in the usual spots, but they're all a little bit nicer, a little bit calmer, a little bit more luxurious than what you'd get in a regular car with regular chimes. And speaking of sounds, take a look at the stereo speakers on the door. Not only do they look nice, but this car has a 28-speaker Revel stereo system. 28 speakers jammed into all nooks and crannies of the Lincoln Nautilus to improve your listening experience as much as possible. And that's not the only interesting thing remaining on the door panel. You also have this rather unusual door handle release. You pull on it and it opens up the door to climb out. Not a typical door handle like you'd see in some cars. This one you pull down and it opens up. A little different, a little outside the box, like a lot of stuff in the new Lincoln Nautilus, except the way it looks. And next up we move on to the back seat in the Lincoln Nautilus, and I always love to climb into the back seat of cars with very beautiful front seat areas and take a look at where the automaker has cheaped out. What did they not make as nice in back because they didn't have to in order to save money? And the answer in the Nautilus is nowhere. Everything back here looks just as nice as up front. You still have the same beautiful perforated leather on the seats. As you can see, the same extensive bolstering and gorgeous stitching and piping, contrast color all throughout. On the door panel, you still have those beautiful speakers, more nice materials, more stitching, more leather, and even those mood accent lights that you had up front, they've been carried over to the back also. You even have the strange door handles. That's not just something for the front seat occupants, you get it in back as well if you wanted it. Now, also worth pointing out with the back seat, a few other interesting items. For one, there's a lot of space back here. Even though this is a mid-size crossover, not supposed to be a huge one, you got a lot of knee room, headroom, legroom, hip room. It's a pretty nice place to spend time in the back. And you have some nice amenities. You got heated seats back here with these nice heated seat buttons that are high quality, luxurious to press. You also have a surprisingly excellent feature for USB-C power ports back here. 2 on the back of each front seat. So you can see 2 right here, and then 2 over on the passenger side as well, allowing you to really charge up all your devices in the back. That's great to see, and a more convenient placement than a lot of brands that kind of stick them lower down at the back of the front center console. Another nice amenity you have, you can drop this centerpiece and you have an armrest back here, or you can open it up to reveal an overly complicated cup holder and a rather useless storage area, just like the German rivals have. They have it in the Nautilus as well. That's how you know they're serious about competing with the best. Now, it's worth pointing out that this back seat is the only back seat in the Lincoln Nautilus, and I mention that because this does not have 3-row seating. This is intended to be a direct competitor to the Lexus RX and other mostly or entirely 2-row SUVs like the BMW X5, the Volvo X60-ish, the Mercedes GLE. That's the world in which this plays, and it's 2-row only, just like most of those. Now, it's worth pointing out Lincoln does offer a 3-row midsize SUV. That is the Aviator if you want more size, but this one is smaller, 2-row only. That's what you get. And next up, we move on to the cargo area in the Nautilus. First, an interesting point. For one thing, the rear wiper is concealed back here. It's hidden under this rear spoiler, so you don't see it when you're just driving around. That's a trick the Range Rover has used for a few different generations now, and it really kind of cleans up the overall look of the back of a car. I'm glad they've done it here. Another interesting thing about the Nautilus is when the car is off and the lights are off, you can't really tell what this is from the back because it doesn't really say. There's no Lincoln badge right in the middle, and although it says Lincoln going across underneath the light bar, you kind of have to look under in order to see it, and even then it's meant to light up, and so when it's not lit, you can't really tell that it's there. This is a pretty anonymous looking vehicle from the back. You're just meant to wonder, what is that thing with the giant interior screen? But anyway, let's climb into the cargo area, and we can see that it is a cargo area. There's nothing particularly unusual or exciting in the Nautilus cargo area, despite the rest of the interior being pretty interesting and notable. This is just cargo space. You do have a button over on the side that you can use to lower the rear seats, although it's not fully power operated, so they don't come back up again, but still a nice convenience feature. You also have a little power plug here, cigarette lighter style, where you can plug stuff in if you want, and a little grocery bag hook, although that's not too unusual or distinctive. Under the floor in this cargo area, you have a spare tire, so there's no extra underfloor storage, and there's no other hidden nooks or crannies as well. Nothing particularly interesting. One notable item that I wish this car had, but it doesn't, is a button to lock the doors and put the tailgate down. You can see there's just one button to drop the tailgate, which is fine, but then if you want to lock the doors, you got to wait until the tailgate completely closes and then press the button on your key fob. It would be nice to have one button that dropped the tailgate, locked the doors, like most other cars have. And by the way, when you do drop the tailgate, take a listen to the luxurious sound that lets you know to get out of the way. And finally, we move up front in the Nautilus to the powertrain. That's where all the magic happens. Actually, that's not really true. The powertrain is kind of the most mediocre component of the entire vehicle. The base level powertrain is a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder that makes 250 horsepower and 275 pound-feet of torque, which frankly is just pretty mediocre in this size and price category. Now, you can step up to a hybrid version of that same engine. Not a plug-in hybrid, but just a standard hybrid you fill with gasoline, and there's a electric component that adds fuel economy and power. This Nautilus has that hybrid 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, and it makes 310 horsepower, which is a pretty healthy number, but it still falls short of the outgoing Nautilus and the V6 that it used to have. Now, with that said, it still sends this car from 0 to 60 in about 6.5 seconds, so acceleration is reasonably quick, and you get good fuel economy, 30 miles per gallon in the city, 31 miles per gallon on the highway, so right around low 30s for fuel economy. It does reasonably well, despite surrendering some power and performance from the previous model. Now, as of this moment, there is no plug-in version of the Nautilus. No full electric, no plug-in hybrid, none are available. You just have these gas or hybrid 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder engines. And with that in mind, let's talk about the Nautilus model lineup. So, this starts right around $52,000 with shipping, which is actually more expensive than the base Lexus RX, although when you put equivalent equipment in them, it's pretty well priced compared to the RX. But again, that's the base model Nautilus, and prices climb from there. The mid-trim reserve model is like $63,000, but if you step up to the top trim, the black label, which this one is, you're spending $76,000, which is big money for a 2-row mid-size SUV. Although the Nautilus has a lot of luxuries, a lot of comfort, and some surprisingly good tech to help justify that relatively high price tag. But with all that in mind, now it's time to see how the Nautilus drives. So let's get behind the wheel and take it for a spin. All right, driving the new Lincoln Nautilus, which doesn't sound all that exciting, but I'm far more excited by this vehicle than I expected to be. That shouldn't really surprise me though, because all of the last new Lincoln SUVs, except for the Corsair, which is kind of dull, have been quite impressive. The new Navigator back in like 17, 18 was amazing. The new Aviator back in like 19 was amazing. And now this is quite impressive for what it is. The problem that Lincoln runs into, at least in my opinion, is they come out with an amazingly good product and then they kind of let it languish. Like the Aviator was great for about 3 years on the market. It was really a top dog. And now it's kind of fallen behind in terms of tech, in terms of styling, quality, etc., as other new vehicles have come on the market. And what Lexus and BMW do to stay relevant is they do facelifts, they do updates, and Lincoln just doesn't. The products, the life cycles are longer and the updates are more minimal. But when a new Lincoln SUV first comes out, it traditionally has been pretty good, and this is no exception. So let's talk about what makes it good. First off, this giant screen going around across the dashboard is excellent. I got everything I'd want up here. I got the speed, the map, the weather, and the music all on here, and I just kind of look down and see it. I don't have to scroll through stuff to find what I'm looking for. It's all just here, and it's great. And yet I still have a touchscreen right directly in my line of sight that makes it easy to adjust and change stuff, put in navigation, destination, change the music, etc. This is better than a heads-up display. This is better than Tesla's giant screen in the center. It is just awesome to have this like movie theater screen right there in the front, showing everything you might want to see. I'm stunned that Lincoln is the brand that does this, but this is fantastic implementation of technology that works in practice incredibly well. All right, I've just turned on the Blue Cruise technology here. I'm in stop and go kind of bumper to bumper traffic, and in theory, it's going to be driving basically for me. And it's actually doing a pretty decent job of that. And that's the best use of these systems really, is kind of in bumper to bumper. It's keeping a decent following distance. I have the shortest distance set. It's keeping a good following distance from the car in front. It is steering the wheel like I would expect it to. Fairly smooth operation in terms of slowing down and speeding up. Now we're coming up to an exit lane. Let's see if it gets confused. Oh, keep your hands on the wheel, it says. But capacitive touch steering wheel, which is good. Tesla doesn't have that. You don't have to babysit it. Okay, coming up to an exit. Oh, it handled it. It continued on straight, even though the line broke on the side to go off to the exit. That is great. The implementation is a little bit weird in the sense that you're using the steering wheel buttons, but it's on the screen. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but not an enormous amount. So it's sad to lose the old V6 that was in this before. I'm not historically a big, let's keep our V6s and V8s kind of guy. As I've driven more of these engines, the turbocharged smaller engines, I have come around and agreed that they are often better. However, in this particular case, you do lose power, and the car's gotten heavier, of course, because it has more technology. And so even if you get the optional hybrid powertrain, which this one has, it's not exactly fast. It's 20 horsepower down, I think, compared to the old V6, and it doesn't really feel that fast. And when you are flooring it to get the most out of it, it's pretty noisy because it's a little engine that's working very hard. Now, the other thing, and one thing that's really good about this car, it is very comfortable in here. Just a really nice, comfortable ride. That's been a really big benefit of the Navigator and of the Aviator. Lincoln kind of made the decision, hey, all these other brands are going sporty. Even Lexus is going sporty, Mercedes, BMW, Audi, they all want sporty. So we're going to go luxury, and I don't know how well it's paid off for them, but I will say the cars really feel like that is their focus. There's a lot of good positive points about this car, and surprisingly few drawbacks, although there are a few. Number one, I think the styling is kind of anonymous. The Navigator and the Aviator are beautiful cars. This is sort of an average looking car. Number two is obviously the brand name, Lincoln. I mean, it's not Lexus, it's not Mercedes, it's not BMW. They've done a great job making better products, but we're still not, at anywhere near a point where this brand measures up to those. And frankly, I think the other demerit is kind of on the powertrain side of things. Like, it's fine, but it's not amazing by any stretch of the imagination. It feels a little underpowered, feels a little noisy. Other than that, this car is really excellent. Absolutely fantastic technology, comfortable ride, drives well, feels good, priced competitively. A lot of nice benefits here for a nice car that maybe you wouldn't really think is nice or think about as being, oh, Lincoln, I haven't thought of that. Well, this car makes you think, well, maybe you should. And so that's the new Lincoln Nautilus. To me, this actually moves the luxury SUV game forward a bit with its huge, excellent screen and its gorgeous interior, which is a surprise because you don't usually expect innovation to come from Lincoln, but this does. It still doesn't have a top-shelf brand name, though, which is going to make it a tough sell compared to the usual rivals. But there are a lot of benefits here, and this is a decent luxury SUV. And now it's time to give the new Lincoln Nautilus a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 54 out of 100, which places the new Nautilus here against the competition. It finishes in the lower half of this chart, but that's actually better than you'd think, especially because the Nautilus ties the Lexus RX, which is its closest competitor. The Nautilus falls behind rivals like the BMW X5 and the Mercedes-Benz GLE 450, but those are more powerful, more exciting, and definitely more expensive. If you don't want to spend GLE or X5 money, but you want similar ride quality and excellent technology, the Nautilus Nautilus does that, but it won't be as engaging to drive, and the Lincoln badge certainly isn't as desirable as Mercedes-Benz or BMW or Lexus.